Okay. I don't think I've seen Kathy's. Okay, cool. So if you haven't done a selfie with your book yet, get that done on Twitter and we'll put that up there. And then the challenges, I wanted to remind you about the challenges. They're kind of fun. Thanks to those who've already done them. I added Kathy's superhero because it made me chuckle. She said her superpower is her patience because she can wait as long as it takes for everyone to see the need for digital learning. So it is taking a while for some, but they'll get there. And then I asked Ms. Arrington if she could get a clip of her in Romper Room, because in her introduction, she mentioned a fun fact about her was that she was on Romper Room when she was a little kid, and she couldn't come up with the clip yet, but she said, "This is what I looked like when I was on Romper Room." So, those are just fun. And we've responded to some, and some other people have responded to some, so there's kind of a little discussion going on in Flipgrid. So if you have a chance, you can use the link that's in the Google Classroom to join that. So I wanted to start with a little reflection from the last session. And it's what I was thinking about at the end of the session. And I wanted to hear what might be your thoughts and ideas on how we could ensure that the Bold School Framework does become a regular part of our planning process, either just as your PLC or as your grade level PLC or your school or as a district. And one of the things that I thought of was, I'm pretty sure that Miss Reynolds has started in the shared drive, a drive for Bold School, and maybe anything that people come up with that works for them, that they could drop it in there so that other people could use it too. We have planbook.com at my school, and so I was thinking about how I could try to make my template for next year to include this. So I wondered if any of you guys also had any thoughts or ideas about that.
I'll say that we do have the the share drive up and ready to go. I don't know if either of you have added the rest of our book club participants or not. If not, I can take care of that. I'll make myself a note to do that right now. But at the beginning, we just thought that this would be a good place for all of us to put materials that we all have access to, and we don't have to try to remember who shared it, who was the owner. That would take all of that out of the equation, and we would all know where to go. So if that hasn't been done yet, I can go in and add all of our participants onto that folder.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. I do remember that you had done that for us way back in the beginning when we were first planning, but then I forgot about that until I was thinking about this, and I've been adding things to the Google Classroom that I thought would be good resources, and but realized that anybody else might not have access to that.
I'll take care of it this weekend.
Thank you.
Virginia said she'd like to use it to meet teachers where they are, old school, and try to coach them toward Bold School.
Cool.
So it's like, I guess, a starting point when you're meeting with folks.
Right. Okay. I put this little flow chart in here that he had from the book. It just mirrors that 5-step plan that we've talked about last time. So we're on Bold School Part 2. There's a little introduction, and you probably noticed that he likes to use movies to illustrate his points. And that last week on Twitter, he used this movie and for his podcast. And so a challenge coming up will be for you to listen to one of his podcasts. And I think there is a link already for them in Google Classroom, but I think he puts them on Twitter as well, so you can probably find them there. And I'll put that in a challenge this week as well. So part 2 is the 11 high effect strategies that he has chosen for the book. But even though high expectations is not one of the ones in the book, it has a huge effect size, he says, of 1.33. And the movie that he used to illustrate that, I had never seen. It's about 14 or 15 years old, and I don't remember it. But I thought it was interesting in terms of education. And so now the it's not going to work. So I'm going to go do it this way. Can you still see the screen? Okay.
We don't have any sound tests.
Oh no.
There's no sound.
Okay. So
You just put a link to it
okay.
for after. We'll do that. We'll put a link in it for after.
It's because you have your headphones plugged in.
Oh, thank you. I'll unplug them and try it again. Which one's the headphones? There's so many cords. There it is.
Yeah,
Maybe not.
Still no? No? Okay. Okay. Well,
Tess, let me try. Let
okay.
me, if you'll stop sharing for a second, I'll pull it over.
Sure. Thank you. Let me get out of there. Okay. I started it at about 32 seconds.
I'm the new basketball coach. Now they have a choice. In Richmond, you're 80% more likely to go to prison than college. This contract states that you will maintain a 2.3 grade point average, and you will wear ties on game day. Between surviving alone.
This is basketball, man.
These boys are student athletes. Student comes first. Standing together. One man struggles, the entire team struggles. We have an incredible gift up here. Do you realize what an opportunity that is for you to get out of here? All you gotta do is have the dream. Cause I just want that big white rib right there. My wife Beyonce, barbecue with her G-strings on it. I said dream, not hallucinate. Gentlemen, we have 6 players failing at least one class. We have failed each other.
You put a lock on the gym and forced them to meet you in the library. Coach Carter has taken the lockout to the next level by canceling last night's game, making it their first loss of the season.
Coach thinks I can play college ball. I'm gonna do that and raise a baby.
What are you saying? You want help?
Basketball's the only thing that these boys have got. Now we're gonna let Carter come in here and take that away from them.
You're gonna get through this.
Paramount Pictures and MTV Films present.
What do I gotta do to play?
Whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. One player triumphs, we all triumph, right? Woo! We're gonna finish what you started, sir. Samuel L. Jackson, Rob Brown, Ashanti. I came to coach basketball players and you became students. I came to teach boys and you became me. This is our time. Coach Carter.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Speaking of teamwork, we're all in this together.
Yeah. Thank you. So from that video, I was thinking about it in real life. If that would be amazing to be able to figure out how to motivate students to be that invested in themselves. But this effect size, I think, was larger than any of the ones that he had in the book. So I thought that was interesting. So for chapter 3, the interactive video was the strategy, and it has a 0.54 effect size. And my little B here with the multiplication of 2 was because that's what it made me think of when he was talking about how using interactive video correctly can multiply the number of teachers in the room. So did anything about that stand out to you guys, or anything you'd like to share about that?
I will put some of the stuff that I put on the questions for that, because I do use interactive video quite a bit in my instruction, and have probably for many years either making them or sharing them. But one thing I totally agree with is that you need to teach that skill up front, what you want, because they treat it like a TV show or whatever. So we do a lot at the beginning of the year on, and I use Brain Pop for that, because you can pause it. We talk about doing closed caption and things like that, so they can take notes. So that's was my take on that.
Thank you. I agree. I've struggled with this in my classroom in first grade with the management of it. And so I think just like I invest in time in the beginning of the year for Daily 5, and this year I spent a lot of time, thankfully, in the beginning of the year teaching them how to get themselves logged in to NCED Cloud and Clever so that they were able to do that. So once we went out, they just had to learn how to log into Google to get into Google Classroom. So it was worth it in the long run, even though it took time at the beginning. So I think next year I'll plan to try to do some more training with this in the beginning of the year so that I can use it more throughout the year. I was reading the reflection journals last night, and someone mentioned, and forgive me, I don't remember the name. Someone mentioned that she thought that it might be something that was not done in high school as much, middle school or high school, but that maybe it's something that could be used for a good effect in middle school or high school as well.
I think that's a good point that you bring up, that at the beginning of the year, spending that time going through your protocols and how you're going to do things to make things go smoother for the rest of the year. Because once you get those in place and you've modeled them, then you don't have to do that again, and you can present this whenever you're doing something. They're gonna be like, oh yeah, we know how to do this.
Mm-hmm. And I'm really grateful for this study because I've come back from NC Ties in March the last few years, excited about trying this thing, whatever it was, and flopped because they weren't trained on how to do it, and I only had a couple months left in the school year, and I'm trying to get everything taught that I need to have taught by the end of the school year. So I think that this book study will help me front load everything to the beginning of the school year so that they're prepared with what I learned from this past NC Ties conference or whatever conference. So the things that Allison was the teacher that he worked with in this chapter that she needed and we needed to learn too, these 5 things. So the big O of academic outcomes, it made me think of the very old school strategy that he did with us at NC Ties, where he did body movements to go with all the 5 steps. And so a big O over your head for outcomes, and then you put a S on your chest like Superman, but it stands for strategies. And then it was the tool belt. Yeah, put your thumbs in your tool belt, and those are that's for your digital and non-digital tools that you're going to use. For your plan, which is the next part, and the plan is down by your knees, a flat surface, and then you stomp your 2 feet for relevance and rigor. So that it works. Those kinds of things work in the classroom, and it's pretty old school as well. So he's right. We need old and new blended together. But was there anything about any of these things in this chapter that you'd like to share about or ask about more? The big O for academic outcomes, it was again prioritizing the tech tools, not just the shiny new gadget. The length of the videos is important. because their attention spans vary from age group to age group, but even the oldest kids still don't have that long of an attention span compared to adults that are doing something because they want to do it.
Right. Stamina.
And then, yeah, the stamina. Questioning with purpose, and then we'll talk about at the end the difference between show and tell or tell and show.
And Laura Hughes said that she liked the way he commented on giving ourselves grace. And I
Yes.
think that we have had to, with everything going on, there's been a lot of grace involved. And that's okay. I mean, you know, and I like that the example, you know, when she finishes, she's like, I'm never doing this again.
Yeah.
But he's making us think, okay, this didn't work. What parts of it didn't work? What do I need to do differently next time? So it's a learning process for you just as much as it is for the kids. It's not I'm never doing this again. So it changes your mindset as well and how we do things.
I also think that there's an art in planning stations, period. And I liked how he showed us the fact that the time was such a factor. Even if you were to do just old school paper pencil with station planning, it's real important that each station has a time consideration involved. And I think the time for Allison is what made her make that statement that she's never going to do this again. And so I've heard, and I think I've even said it myself when I've done stations, I'm not going to do this again, but it really came down to the planning piece of it. And so I think that's where the blended and the old school really, to me, meshed very well with one another, because station planning is not easy to do. It's a fine art.
Mm-hmm. As kindergartners and first graders, they got it down pat. They've got, they know how to run those stations and get things going.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right about that, but when we throw the technology in there, there's another little thing for us to think about that did throw me for a loop, but I want to get past that. But we like last week when we were finished, Miss Beaker and I were like, oh, we never want to do that again. But we did it again, so we appreciate you helping us to fail forward.
We tried different things this time, and we found new challenges. I think every time we're going to have a meet, it's going to be some kind of challenge. So we're really pushing ourselves to figure this out.
What about the question with purpose piece? That was one of the parts where I was like, I bet I do ask hundreds of questions a day that aren't very high level questions. I plan in my planning for higher level questions, and usually that's with writing, some kind of writing response that I'll want them to do. But I probably do inundate them all day long with questions that aren't of very high value.
I think it was helpful for me when I was in the classroom to either have some kind of visual to recall my attention to, because I agree, and I think it's in the next chapter about some things do need to be planned out as far as questioning. You do need to have some idea, but also you have to be willing to roll with it when kids bring up things and go off the reservation, and you gotta be able to handle that. And having worked with gifted kids for 23 years, they can come up with some doozies that you gotta be willing to take it and go with it. But yeah, sometimes having a visual, whether it was something on my clipboard or whether it was up on the wall, just to remind me to use some of the verbs from the higher level to try and stretch their thinking and scaffold.
That's one of the things, this diagram, that I thought I might try to figure out how to get in my template on the lesson planning online that we used here at Chabra, so that it's right there on my face and I have to think about it.
Yeah,
but
Robert said, I think sometimes we use question to see if kids are engaged.
Yeah, or paying attention. Yeah, that's in the next chapter too. We'll talk about that some more in a little bit.
It's gotcha questions, not a thick or thin. It's a gotcha.
Yeah, you got me on that one. The show and tell or tell and show. It seemed like he felt like they both had value, but maybe for not always the same purpose. It made me think of the tell and show one, made me think of something that I like to do in math. We'll have a problem of the day, like a word problem of the day, and we'll do that first thing. And then I look at different strategies that kids have used and share them. But I read about some teacher somewhere over the years, I don't remember who, or I would give them credit, but it was on my favorite no. And so I'll ask the children who make a mistake, if it's an interesting mistake, or I can tell what they were thinking and where they got off track, I'll ask them permission to share it as my favorite no for the day. And so the other kids will have to think about helping that child understand what their mistake was, or even understand what their thinking was. And so that's what the tell and show made me think of in my day, that I might be able to use in that way somehow. Do any of y'all have a preference for one over the other?
I think they both have their place. It depends. I found as a science teacher for the 5th grade EOG that questioning strategy and having them explain their thinking was hugely valuable, not just for that person to work through it themselves, but also for their peers to hear that processing. In fact, I think that's probably the vocabulary knowledge and then that processing and working through it, in my opinion, was why my kids were so successful on that assessment.
I think it's a good point that they can learn from each other as well. Mm-hmm. Simba here. Anybody remember why Simba's here? He loves his movies.
I love all the movie references.
Yeah. Simba was his example of failing forward.
Yes.
All right. So these were all the tech tools that he listed in this section. I don't know that Nearpod was one of them, but I thought it might work for that as well. And I just wondered if you guys know of any others that I don't know, because I had never heard of this Dialogues one. I've heard of Edpuzzle, and it's one of the ones that I want to learn more about and use in my classroom. And I do use Screencast-O-Matic sometimes during this distance learning process, but I could use it for other things like that, for learning things as well. This one was new to me. I was familiar with Nearpod, but I haven't really used it yet. Are there any others that you guys think would be good for this that he did not mention? I can add them to the slide deck later on.
To answer Shelley's question, there was a time when we could add cards to YouTube videos. It was very similar to what you can do in Edpuzzle, but as Kathy and I learned very recently, after the COPA federal regulations came down and started affecting YouTube, they took that, a sad face, they took that ability off if the video is marked for students, which is, frustrating for us, but we still do have Edpuzzle. But to answer Shelley's question, yes, they did take it off, and it was for that reason.
Oh, wow.
I did not know that. Any others before we move on, that tools that you might think might work for this? I know there's another one that we've used called Screencastify that works similarly to this one, but you can record longer for free on the Screencast-O-Matic than the Screencastify.
I had to buy it.
Did you?
On a free Screencastify. So I had to
Guess we could add our Google Meets here. You could turn that in and use the videos, here in some way, and then add some questions in during the video or during the Edpuzzle, pulling in Edpuzzle.
Okay.
Jason, after using it this year, just the little bit that I used it, I know next year there's a lot of things that I'm going to do library-wise to front load everybody, staff and students, on things. So I can't see myself not using it.
Which one are you talking about, Ms. Speaker?
Screencastify.
Okay.
Jason had said he needed to purchase a subscription as well. it's definitely worth it.
Most of the things I've used it for while we've been on distance learning have been 5 minutes or less, so I was able to use Screencastify, but there were a few that I needed more than that. So Screencast-O-Matic, I think, will let you go up to 10 minutes for free.
Oh, Sandra says, don't buy things with your own money until we see what we'll have access to next year.
Okay.
I know, but I'm like Veruca Salt. I needed it now.
Okay, so on to chapter 4. The questioning and Socratic seminar had a 0.48 effect size. And if I remember right, y'all speak up if I'm wrong, I think he said that 0.4, about 0.4 something was equivalent to about a year and a half worth of growth in 1 year.
I believe
Was that
so.
right?
I will go back and check while you're presenting.
So it was still significant. Here's Miss Beaker's that'll be. So this is, I put this here because that's when I went, oh yeah, that's probably me, asking tons of questions every day.
Yeah, he said more than a year.
Yeah, more than a year. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And on this strategy is where he was talking about Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And so this is probably what I sound like to the kids. Anyone? And then the Socratic method is a good method for questioning. That's searching for truth and the values in the exploration in the questions and getting them to think, not necessarily get to a right answer. Although we, of course, as teachers want them to get to a right answer, but sometimes there's not necessarily a right answer, but the value is in the discussion.
Yeah, I put in the resources a thing called the Harkness table. I got it from Edutopia quite a while ago, but it's a way that they set up a table to have a book discussion. And you have your questions, so you've already got your pre-planning, the questions that you're going to use, and you're using the Socratic questions to get feedback. But you have a drawing of the table and who's around it. And so you kind of mark who speaks and who speaks to whom and who, to try to get them to have that discussion themselves. And, I don't know if it's something that you can use, but I threw it in there because I think it works well with this. And it's a good resource to have if you're interested in trying it.
Yeah, the examples in the book so far have been higher grade level examples than would be helpful very much to me in first grade. But
Right.
I wondered what the folks who teach middle school and high school thought of this one.
Well, and the Harkness is it's an upper level, but you can tweak it to fit your needs if you're doing something with a small group. I think it would work well with a small group because you have better access to who's there and who's speaking. And so.
I think it helps if you can do like a fishbowl activity where you have a key group in the front modeling what one looks like that you've prepped, or if we could ever get back to face with each other, we could do some kind of short video where we show one with teachers around the the circle to have that conversation. But Socratic Socratic seminars are awesome. I love them, and they're not something students are naturally comfortable with. They have to be taught the process, and that the point is to just add your thoughts to the group, to share your thinking, and to always go back. I loved it as a teacher because there was always an anchor piece of text that I did them around. So it was always, tell us what you're thinking, but base your thinking off of something that connects to the text. And they always had to refer back to something in the text that we were using. And so I found that very helpful.
Prove it with the text. And they don't, and unfortunately, what I see in school is that the students, they have to read a passage, they have to find a right answer. And, that's what they do. And when they come to do a book club or we do something together and I ask them what they think, they just look at me in a panic. They have no idea. So that thinking piece, that Socratic method is it's really important for them to think about what they're reading and to be able to prove what they say from the text, not just, throw something out there. And they have a hard time with that. But you're right, it's something they've got to be taught and they've got to practice.
I have participated in one as an adult, but I don't remember doing it in school when I was a kid. But the closest thing I could think of to my first grade classroom is in the morning when we have our morning meetings. I ask them to sit in around the edges of our rug facing each other so that we can have, I call it our classroom conversations or collaborative conversations in the morning. And it's usually around some kind of social emotional learning that we're doing. But I do want them to respond to each other and not just back to me all the time. And they really struggle with it in the beginning. They also struggle with knowing the difference between a question and a statement. And so I'll say, you can respond with a statement or ask them a question, and they'll say, I have a question, and then make a statement. So anyway, that's something that we have to work on because it's not natural to them.
Do you think that, and this is totally a little off topic, do you think that some of the struggles kids have with that is because a very small percentage, if any, still do family dinners around the table where, technology is off and they're having a conversation, having to look for those cues, when somebody stops talking, now I can interject, or?
It's possible. It's possible. They do like to chat with me. So like I'll sometimes eat lunch with them in the classroom. That's one of the things that they can buy with their leader tickets. And they like to just talk to me and just talk about things. But it's one-on-one in that way instead of as a whole group and responding to multiple people.
I actually did it right before I went into the AIG position with my kids in the cafeteria, and would take a tablecloth. I don't know why they thought that was such a big deal, but we put a tablecloth in a section of the lunch table and a group would get to sit with me. And I didn't think they would, I just thought I would try it. And if it bombed, who cares? I wouldn't do it anymore. But I really had a tremendous response, a lot more than I thought I would. Kids who wanted to sit with a tablecloth and have a discussion around the lunch table with me.
Some of them I do think just are chatty and they like to chat and they're sociable, but some of them I do believe don't have the attention at home. But getting off track. So Pablo was the teacher in this example, and so what Pablo and we needed to learn were to remember what gets scripted gets asked, and the goal of the questions is not to get the kids to answer, but to think, and that's kind of what we were just talking about. Sometimes I have to really pull the thinking out of them. So like I'll have to ask them a lot of leading questions to get them to share what they're thinking. It's in there, they just don't know how to articulate it.
Okay, I'm not doing a good job with questions because my computer keeps freezing.
Oh, do you need to catch up?
No, Virginia, the resource, the Harkness table is in the Google Classroom under resources. If it's not, it will be this afternoon.
It is in there. I saw it earlier. I've added some things in there as well, including something I want to show you at the end. I'll write that down.
Well, Laura put Kahoot is a good thing because safety, the safety and being able to answer without being wrong in front of everybody.
Yeah, that's something that I thought about in the question in the reflection journal about cold calling on kids, where I was guilty sometimes of doing that. Not to try to make someone who's shy not be shy, but if they're chatting or not paying attention, I might say their name to get them back on track, but it's probably not very effective.
Well, if we're talking about failing forward ourselves, it's something that we need to, it's a skill they need as well to be able to say something off the wall. And I've had it happen where, they've said something off the wall, but it's because of a connection they made with what they were reading, but think they're wrong, and they won't, they just freeze up. And it takes a long time for them to trust that it's okay if you have something off the wall, if you have a connection that you can make. And that just, it starts springing off other things. But they've got to practice failing as well and being okay. It's not the end of the world.
I wondered, was it Laura that said that about Kahoot?
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was a good idea to use technology to get the voices of the shy kids, but then I also wondered if it was going to interfere with trying to build the classroom community that I start from the beginning, trying to make them know that it's safe to say something off the wall that makes sense to them, but maybe not to everybody else, and feel safe to be able to do that in our classroom without feeling judged or being made fun of. So I wonder what the balance is between encouraging them to be able to speak with their real voice, but also being able to hear what they won't say.
Yeah. As someone who is painfully shy and always has been, I will speak up to this. I think you have to do both, because I did both in my class, that you have to give them that comfort that you've got their back and that you're not going to put them on the spot in a way that's going to humiliate them or make them feel embarrassed in front of their peers. But there's also a time and a place, I think, to get everybody's response. Because of the time factor, you can leverage the technology piece to get a much larger amount of responses in a very short period of time that you can then evaluate. But there are certainly times for both, but you do have to build that trust right from the beginning. They have to know that they're safe with you. And it has to be on their, they have to be, you can't take free will out of it. They have to feel comfortable. They have to feel respected. They have to feel safe. And that their opinion matters to be heard. Right. So I think both have their time and place.
And people have mentioned quizzes and Nearpod, Menti, polls, Pear Deck. Did I miss anything else? I said quizzes, didn't I? And Brenda Forehand said word art has been useful. So.
Well, then and maybe we can get those out of the chat later, and I'll add them to the next slide.
Yes.
I think it would be really nice to be able to hear from those quiet kids more often throughout the day using technology, or in any way, actually, because you don't hear as much from them as you do from the kids that are less shy. So in both the last strategy and this one, he discussed about making it relevant and rigorous. So there's that. A different version of the little table in the last one, but in the question, we got to make sure that we are asking questions at multiple levels of cognition. And then front loading the scripted questions into the technologies. That's where the planning is gonna be important. If it's not, you can write the questions, but you don't have time when you're standing in front of your kids to be typing them in. It needs to be done ahead of time. But I do sometimes have something like that done, and I think it's ready to go. And then in the middle of it, I realize that it's not working, and I want to change it. So I struggle between just going forward with what I've got and trying to fix it later, or trying to fix it right then. But this is what we were talking about before, using the technology to reach more learners. I do think it's a good idea. But what do you guys, have you ever had that situation happen where you realize in the middle of it that this isn't working?
Mm-hmm. Fail forward a lot.
I don't know whether it's better to just stop then and try to fix it or not.
When you're working with tech, I've definitely had where I can overestimate some of their skills. And so I think we got this because we've done this other piece before. And so it's just a jump to this next level. And I totally have miscalculated that it's bigger than a little skip. It might be a leap, and had to have, yeah, sometimes I've had moments where I know that I've had to just say, okay, we're going to go back to just, typing or reading or whatever, something until I can regroup, because trying to work through something that at that moment is bogging down, just like you're in in the ruts. I've had that happen, and I just have to change gears, but you have to have a backup plan that is easier to go to, so you can redirect those ones that are just, had to work with one-on-one. And so the other kids, if they're getting it or whatever, they might have something a little more independent thing that they can go for, whether it's of course, mine's more tech related class, but even in whatever subject matter, if you're throwing that tech piece in there and it's bogging something down because 2 or 3 kids are stuck or they're frustrated or can't get there and you can't move forward. So then, just making sure you have something that's backup friendly.
Yeah, it feels like I'm wasting my time otherwise.
Yeah. Or they'll get impatient. The kids will get impatient waiting on you to try to help, 2 or 3 other students with it because they're having such a hard time. And kids coming in late, all those wonderful things. Yeah.
Yeah. And then they're not doing anything, so they're not learning anything. So
Yeah.
that makes me even more frustrated and flustered.
Yeah, if anybody's not doing something because they're waiting on me or while I'm helping somebody, that really gets my frustration level up. I want to always have something ready. Most of the time, I will say it always happens, but there are times when you're just not prepared. Things have changed in the day or something changes and you just have to go with that. And I hate that frustration level. I really do.
But Lynette said she thinks it's good for students to see that things don't always work, because it gives them a chance to see how we handle failure. Because
that's true.
I guess somebody else is failing. It's quite another way for everybody.
Yeah, that's true. I remember when I was student teaching, I was with Miss Metger at Moyock Elementary, and she's the first person that I heard saying, technology is great when it works.
Mm-hmm. Amen, sister.
But I've come to find out that usually the technology is working. It's the operator, me, that's the problem. So I have some of the tech tools that he mentioned here, and then I'll go and add the ones that you guys mentioned that Ms. Beaker already said. But if there are any others, would you type those in the chat too, and we'll add those. I checked out Plickers because Ms. Beaker had mentioned it to me recently too. And then when I was reading this chapter, he mentioned that it was a good way to segue into blended learning because you just have the one device and you're just scanning all the cards. So I looked at it a little bit, but I haven't put a whole lot of time into it yet. So I've got to figure that one out. I think it might work for some of the things that I do with my first graders as far as getting quick feedback from everybody. I'm getting better with Twitter. I do like Google Forms. By the way, there is, what is it called? MC Learns. There's a online technology conference that was 2 or 3 days long just recently that's piggybacked onto MC Ties with the Sked app. And there's another one coming up. There was some.
Next week.
Yeah. What made me think of that was one of the ones that I attended was called Getting Fancy with Google Forms. And I do like using Google Forms for putting feedback in there. So if they make a mistake, then they get feedback that will teach them about what the mistake was.
And Molly Holloman, who did our TPAC sessions, she was part of that process. And so was Chris Bennett, who did our sessions yesterday. And she said that those videos from the first rounds would be posted online so we could have access to those as well if we were interested.
That's interesting. And I want to look into this SOCRATIC one because it seemed interesting in this context. Let's see what that's all about. I don't know if it's something that I'd be able to use at my grade level or if it's better for upper grade levels. All right, so the wows and the go apes. So was there anything that you thought was really a eye-opener or aha or wow in these 2 chapters? The one for me, Miss Robertson, is Miss Robertson here?
She
I thought
is.
I'll pop in at the beginning.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, you know how in the Pioneer Valley Digital Reader, they have some of the books with the pre-recorded book introductions and word work and the discussions and the writing afterward. And it made me think that I could really differentiate more even with guided reading, especially for my high readers, because I have a little girl who's able to read level S already right now. With accuracy, fluency, and comprehension. She's just an outstanding reader and thinker. So I don't have the opportunity to see her at my table as often as I would like to, but I could make videos of that sort for her or another student like her, or even others as well. So I could maybe double the types of guided reading with not one group with me and another group online, and possibly get a lot more guided reading done that way.
That's a great idea. Or you could assign the book the way that they have it, and then you could do the running record on it the next day and then see how it goes from there. But that's a great way to incorporate technology into guided reading.
Yeah, because there's only one of me and Miss Sanders, and Miss Sanders is awesome, and she's great at teaching guided reading too, but some of our kids just need more than she and I can do in a day.
Anybody else have wows from the chapters that you want to share?
I liked on page 61 where he said there's no such thing as failure, just feedback. As a perfectionist, I have a hard, believe me, I'm harder on myself than anybody else can be. And I'm still learning how to accept my own mistakes. And I think that was good for me to hear.
Okay, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, now sorry, we got too many computers going on. It's Dr. Radke at Moyak Middle, sitting in front of Gorza, and one of our ahas was to look at the way that they presented that first example of the grouping type classroom where she tried to do too much. What kind of made me say aha is instead of making those into centers, if we do have to go to a situation like an A-B day, then that group of kids who are online theoretically can still attend. She'd be dealing with the kids who are doing a task. She can also do the direct instruction, and then she can check in with the kids who are virtual. So they have a whole bunch of little computers over there of kids who are on, but those could literally be our virtual kids. And that way they're still getting touched during the day. So it's not necessarily an A-B day. We're not going to get in trouble for not giving 180 days of instruction should we go that way, and gives us yet another way to sort of include the kids in all of the classroom, regardless of what day. And we don't turn into, two cohorts who never meet.
That's a great idea. The other, and that made me think of the idea of my kids who are not engaging at all with me online for guided reading, of all the ones who have continued to do guided reading lessons with me online have continued to make growth even out of school, and the ones who have not clearly are not making growth. And so I thought I could do some of those videos to send to them, and maybe they will just play them and do them at home, even though they won't necessarily get online with me. Maybe that I could help them that way. But that's a great idea about the A and B. All right, so Go 8 is to think about how you can apply, practice, and explore from this week and next week. And Ms. Beaker, this was Ms. Beaker's idea. Do you want to discuss this now, or something to think about for the future?
Just to think about for the future, since we've just introduced it. But as we're looking at the different chapters and the strategies that he's talking about, how would you apply it or put it in practice or explore it? Or are you putting it into practice, or is this something you want to explore and try for next year? There's so many unknowns, or there's some things that we could actually incorporate going in next year. I thought about the fishbowl, Sandra. you could have computers set up in a circle and have your inner circle, outer circle, and just have, have a contact back and forth with whoever's at that computer at that time. It could be done.
So I thought it would be good to start each new session with a little bit of something from the last one. So maybe next time we can start with what you've thought about for the apply, practice, and explore from this time. And we also have to apologize to the people who had wanted to do the Twitter, slow chat Twitter, because that fell by the wayside after our being flabbergasted last week. So we will work on that this week and get that caught up this week.
No worries. I think we all appreciate all that you two ladies are doing to provide this opportunity for us. You're definitely going above and beyond, and we want it to be an enjoyable experience for everybody. So thank you both, and thanks for not giving up after last week, and thanks for everybody who's showing patience, and it's been a great time.
Thank you. There was one last thing I wanted to show you that I did add as far as thinking about the planning, and it was this document that I found somewhere in his stuff to help you reflect on what worked and didn't work. So if you're someone who likes something you can write to check off the boxes, this might help you after the fact as you think about how it went. And that is linked in the resources section of the Google Classroom. So right here, there's all the resources that we've linked in. And there are webinars that I found of his as well. And so I've kind of set some of them to show now and some of them to show up later. And then also I found some resources from another school district that went with each chapter. So I've linked those in too. And they're here as well if you'd like to take a look at those for some more ideas. But thank you all for coming and bearing with us.
Yes. Look forward to seeing you on Friday.